Nathan Carter stood at the defense table, his palms trembling as the two arresting officers chuckled arrogantly from the witness stand. The judge slammed the gavel for order just as the courtroom doors burst open. A commanding figure in a flawless suit strode in, flanked by federal agents, the room instantly silenced. The officer's laughter froze when the newcomer placed a steady hand on Nathan's shoulder and declared, "That's enough. This young man is my son." Shock ripples through the chamber. Before I unravel how this dramatic moment unfolded, let me know in the comments where you're watching from. And don't forget to hit like and subscribe for more stories where power is challenged. To understand this courtroom bombshell, we need to rewind. Nathan Carter, age 17, had been heading home after staying late with his advanced placement study group. His backpack was heavy with physics and calculus books as he walked through Crestwood Heights, a neighborhood of million-dollar homes where someone like him supposedly didn't belong. The golden sunset stretched long shadows across the manicured lawns. Nathan, lost in thought about a group project, barely noticed the patrol car trailing him until it slowed deliberately. Inside sat Officers Granger and Doyle. Granger, a broad, seasoned cop with 2 decades on the force, muttered, "Doesn't look like he lives here," nudging his ambitious younger partner. Their cruiser crept behind Nathan for 3 blocks, its engine growling low like a predator stalking. Nathan's heart raced. He remembered his parents' instructions, lessons drilled since he was 12, about surviving police stops. Keep hands visible, speak respectfully, never argue, move carefully. Suddenly, the car's lights flashed, and the siren gave a sharp chirp. "Hey, you! Stop!" barked Granger. Nathan froze, turning slowly, palms open at his sides. "Good evening, officers. Is something wrong?" he asked, voice steady, though adrenaline surged. Doyle climbed out, his hand hovering near his holster. "You match a suspect's description." "What are you doing here?" Nathan answered carefully. "I'm walking home. My family lives on Maple Drive. We moved here 4 months ago." Granger circled him like a hawk. "Sure you do, kid. Let's see some ID." Nathan nodded cautiously. "Yes, sir. In my wallet." "I'll reach for it now." He narrated each motion slowly, drawing a smirk from Granger. "Well trained, aren't you?" The teen handed over his school ID. "Doesn't prove address," Doyle dismissed, flicking it back without care. "I can call my father to confirm," Nathan suggested, clinging to composure. The remark drew mocking laughter. "Your dad? What's he do? Mow lawns around here?" Granger sneered, Doyle chuckling. Nathan repeated, calm but firm. "My father works for the federal government." Their laughter grew harsher. "Yeah, sure. Maybe scrubbing floors at City Hall," Doyle said with a sneer. Nathan reached slowly for his phone. "I'll call him right now." He didn't finish before Granger lunged, twisting Nathan's arm viciously. "He's reaching for something," the officer yelled, though the phone was plainly visible. Nathan was shoved against the hot hood of the cruiser, handcuffed roughly as he gasped. "I was only grabbing my phone." "That's what they all say," Doyle retorted, seizing the phone. "Resisting arrest, acting suspicious." As they loaded Nathan into the back seat, he tried again. "Please, my father." Doyle cut him off, mocking. "Let me guess. CIA, FBI, maybe the president himself?" Their laughter rang cruel as they locked him in. Granger rifled through his textbooks. "Stolen goods?" Each book bore Nathan's name inside, but the officers ignored it. As the cruiser turned away, Nathan glimpsed his neighbor, Mrs. Jacobs, watching with alarm from her porch. He prayed she would call his parents. Soon the familiar streets vanished, replaced by the sterile glow of the precinct. The fluorescent lights buzzed above as he was marched inside. The intake officer barely glanced up. "Name?" he barked. "Nathan Carter," the teen said firmly, though his voice quivered. "Speak up." "This isn't your classroom," the officer mocked. Nathan repeated louder. Fingerprints, mugshot, belongings stripped away into a plastic bin. Routine procedures meant to strip dignity. "I need to call my father," Nathan insisted, his voice taut with control. The clerk yawned dismissively. "Phones are a privilege." You'll get one after processing. Nathan knew the rule. One call was standard. But arguing here felt dangerous. Doyle reappeared, shoving him forward. Got one of those honor roll punks, he said loudly. Other officers looked up, some sneering, others indifferent. Says his daddy's some big shot in government? Maybe on welfare instead. Laughter echoed through the station. Each stepped through the gauntlet, tightening Nathan's chest. He fixed his gaze ahead, face neutral, hiding the storm of humiliation, rage, and fear beneath. Doyle finally shoved him into a holding cell, unlocking the cuffs with a painful twist. Enjoy your suite, he sneered, slamming the door with a clang that reverberated. The cell was bare, metal bench, open toilet, cold walls. Another man sat there, older, with weary eyes and salt and pepper hair. He studied Nathan calmly. First time? He asked after Doyle left. Nathan nodded, rubbing his wrists. Marcus, the man introduced. Nathan, he answered, cautious. What did they pin on you? Marcus gave a knowing smirk. Walking while black. The man's sarcasm dripped with painful truth. For the next hour, Marcus coached Nathan quietly how to endure, what rights might be trampled when silence was survival. Lesson 1, Marcus said grimly. The law in books ain't the law on the street. Lesson 2, patience is your weapon. Don't let them break you before your time. Meanwhile, across the city, FBI Director Jonathan Carter led a high-stakes meeting. He sat at the head of a polished conference table inside headquarters, analyzing the final stages of a 2-year probe into a massive laundering network. Known for calm precision and iron focus, Jonathan had carved his path upward despite systemic walls stacked against him. His suit, perfectly tailored. His posture, unyielding even after 12 hours of tense discussions. Our simultaneous raids must synchronize to the second, he instructed his team when a knock interrupted. His new assistant, Agent Sofia Ramirez, stepped in with an apologetic urgency. In their world, unexpected interruptions never meant something trivial. Sir, it's regarding your son. The room stilled as Jonathan rose, face unreadable, though those closest would notice the slight tightening at his eyes. He nodded briskly. Continue the coordination plans. I'll return out in the hall. Agent Ramirez handed him a note. Nathan had been arrested near their home, charged with suspicious behavior, denied a phone call. His wife learned from a neighbor. Jonathan scanned the details, fury coiled beneath his disciplined calm. He handed back the note. Thank you. Notify Deputy Director Kim to lead the remainder. Have my car ready. Ramirez hurried off. Jonathan placed a series of calls, each precise and brief, to his wife Catherine, to his security detail, to the Attorney General's office, each step deliberate, methodical, never rash. Jonathan Carter hadn't shattered ceilings to act impulsively. He mastered channeling injustice into strategic response, using the very system once bent against him. Tonight, he would wield that same system to defend his son. His mind lingered on Nathan, brilliant, gentle, steady, a boy forced to use survival lessons far too soon. That thought steeled him. He remembered the careful instructions he and Catherine had given their son, warnings born of lived experience, never meant to be tested so young. Now Nathan had been tested. Jonathan's fury solidified into resolve. He adjusted his cufflinks, the symbol of his station gleaming under the hall lights, and strode toward the waiting car. As the convoy pulled away, sirens clearing traffic ahead, Jonathan rehearsed his approach. He would not storm in shouting. He would dismantle arrogance with authority, ignorance with truth. The officers who mocked his son were about to discover exactly who Nathan's father was. And this time, justice would not be delayed. It would arrive at the door. At the courthouse, where the officers smugly testified, Nathan stood trembling but unbroken. The gavel cracked for silence just as the doors opened, and Jonathan Carter entered, surrounded by agents. Every head turned. The officers' laughter died instantly. Jonathan placed his hand firmly on Nathan's shoulder and declared, "That will do." He is my son. The declaration cut the air like steel. Gasps spread across the room. The judge's eyes widened at the sight of the FBI director, himself standing beside the boy. The smirks vanished from Granger and Doyle's faces, replaced by pale silence. For the first time since his arrest, Nathan felt a wave of safety wash over him. The story of power abused had met a power far greater, justice embodied not by force, but by presence and authority. Yet Jonathan's gaze carried no triumph, only restrained fury. He knew this was just one moment in a much longer battle against prejudice, one his son should never have been forced to fight. Still, inside that courtroom, silence reigned. Jonathan Carter had arrived, not only as a father, but as a man who had climbed to the highest level of justice, prepared to remind everyone present of the cost of arrogance. And as Nathan stood straighter at his side, the message was clear: dignity would not be mocked again. Outside the courtroom, whispers spread like wildfire. Federal agents had stepped in, not for a sting, but for a boy unfairly accused. Inside, Jonathan's presence demanded accountability. He had endured a lifetime of barriers. Tonight, he would dismantle another. And Nathan, older now by painful experience, would never forget the moment his father walked through that door. For him, it wasn't simply rescue, it was revelation that injustice could be challenged, that silence could be broken, that authority could serve truth instead of abuse. He had been mocked for claiming his father worked for the government. Now every officer in that room saw the truth with their own eyes. What began as an ordinary walk home had spiraled into humiliation, then into a courtroom reckoning. And though the scars of prejudice would linger, Nathan knew this day marked a turning point. Because in the end, his father's words proved right. Dignity mattered more than ignorance. And Jonathan Carter had made sure the world remembered it. The boy's future was still his own. His father's fight had become his as well. And though the system remained flawed, both understood this moment was only the beginning. Together they would confront what lay ahead, not as victim and rescuer, but as family bound by resolve, stronger than any injustice. The courtroom remained frozen, breaths held, as Jonathan Carter stood tall beside his son. His silence was louder than any speech, his presence was power. And in that moment, the officers who once laughed finally realized what it meant when Nathan had said, "My father works for the federal government." The truth had arrived, undeniable and unshakable. And Jonathan's thoughts, even then, rested not on vengeance, but on Nathan, his brilliant boy, with his mother's keen mind and his own quiet dignity, a boy who should never again need those careful instructions for survival, a boy who deserved more. Nathan was now living the harsh reality his parents had always warned him about, despite their efforts to shield him. Jonathan adjusted his tie, glanced at his watch, and strode toward the elevator. His expression betrayed none of his fury, but his resolve was sharp. The officers had no idea what awaited them. What would you do if your child was targeted simply because of skin color? Would you erupt in anger or plot every step with precision? Comment 1 if you believe Director Carter should reveal his identity immediately, or 2 if you think his restraint will carve out a deeper justice. Imagine stepping into a place designed to intimidate, knowing your child was unjustly locked inside. How would you steady yourself? Jonathan Carter arrived at the precinct in an unmarked government car, instructing his driver to stay put. His dark suit and understated tie concealed his true rank, granting him quiet observation. The afternoon sun stretched shadows across the parking lot as Jonathan buttoned his jacket. He entered through the main doors, his presence deliberate, his appearance chosen to seem ordinary. No flashy badges, no entourage, only the authority of a man determined to see justice served without revealing too much too soon. Inside, the reception area buzzed with noise. Phones rang, civilians fidgeted on plastic chairs, officers filed reports. At the desk sat a burly sergeant, typing slowly with two fingers, ignoring the growing line. Jonathan approached calmly. "Excuse me," he said, polite yet firm. The sergeant kept typing, his irritation already palpable. Finally, the sergeant looked up with an annoyed snort. "Sit down. I'll get to you when I'm ready." Jonathan didn't budge. "I'm here about Nathan Carter, brought in about 2 hours ago." "I'm his father." The sergeant's eyes narrowed, pretending confusion. "Carter? Let me see if he's on the list." He scrolled lazily, sipping from a chipped mug that read, "I may be wrong, but I doubt it." Jonathan stood still, his face unreadable, quietly surveying the room, distinguishing who worked diligently and who treated authority as a pastime. At last the sergeant grunted, "Yeah, he's here. Resisting arrest, suspicious conduct. Have a seat." He gestured toward a crowded seating area filled with weary faces who had likely waited for hours. "I'd like to see my son now," Jonathan replied, tone respectful, yet carrying weight unmistakable to anyone attuned to authority. The sergeant flushed slightly but tried to maintain control. "We've got procedures, mister." "Could be hours." He turned his attention elsewhere. Jonathan remained. "My son is 17. He has the right to a parent present during questioning. Has he been allowed his call?" The sergeant rose, using his bulk to intimidate. "You're holding up the line." "Sit down or leave." His tone dripped with condescension, but Jonathan's gaze never wavered. Officers nearby began to notice, some with curiosity, others with subtle unease. Jonathan reached slowly into his jacket. The sergeant's hand twitched toward his weapon, but Jonathan calmly produced a simple card, sliding it across the desk. "I believe Captain Mercer would want to know I'm here." His words landed firmly without drama. The sergeant glanced, scoffed, then looked again. His expression shifted as recognition dawned. "Wait here," he muttered, all bravado evaporating. He turned away, speaking in hushed tones over the phone. The station's energy shifted. Officers who had lounged straightened to paperwork. A younger officer replaced the desk sergeant, glancing nervously at Jonathan. Moments later, a door opened, and a woman in her 50s entered, uniform crisp, captain's bars gleaming. "Director Carter," she said loudly, drawing startled looks. "I had no idea you were here. Please come with me." Her respectful urgency contrasted sharply with the dismissive welcome Jonathan had first received. Heads turned across the room. Captain Evelyn Mercer led him down a private hallway, speaking quickly in a low tone. "Sir, I worked with your task force during the Easton trafficking case years ago. If I'd known your son was involved—" Jonathan cut her off gently but firmly. "Let's discuss in private, Captain." She nodded, unlocking her office door. "Where is my son?" Jonathan asked immediately, declining her offer to sit. Mercer straightened. "Holding cell 3. "I'll have him brought out at once." Jonathan raised a hand. "Not yet. I want to speak with the arresting officers first." Mercer hesitated. "Granger and Doyle are just ending shift. I can call them tomorrow." "Now, Captain," Jonathan said evenly. The authority in his voice erased doubt. Mercer quickly phoned. "Have officers Granger and Doyle report here immediately." While waiting, Jonathan requested the arrest report and body camera recordings. Mercer moved briskly to comply, her nerves evident as she realized the enormity. "Of course, Director. I'll escort you before leaving." Jonathan turned back to the officers, whose faces were ghostly pale. "You're free to go for now, but don't leave town. We'll continue this conversation." His tone carried quiet menace, every syllable promising accountability. Neither officer dared move until he left the room. As Jonathan followed Mercer down the hallway, the precinct atmosphere had transformed. Word of his presence spread swiftly. Officers who earlier ignored him now stiffened to attention. Some nodded respectfully, others averted their gaze entirely. The shift in energy was undeniable. Justice had entered the building, and everyone felt it. For Jonathan, though, none of this spectacle mattered. Only one thing did: his son. Nathan had been humiliated, mocked, and denied his rights. Now that mockery was unraveling under the weight of truth. Jonathan's fury remained contained, but his intent was unmistakable. He was there not just as director, but as a father. As they neared the holding cells, Jonathan's stride never faltered. The path from the courtroom to this station carried echoes of history, of battles fought by those before him, of barriers he had shattered himself. But tonight wasn't about history. Tonight was about his son, and he would not be failed. Officers whispered in corners, some pretending to work, others frozen by recognition. Jonathan ignored them all. His only focus was Nathan, 17, brilliant and undeserving of this ordeal. The boy had faced cruelty for existing in the wrong place at the wrong time. That injustice was about to meet its reckoning. Captain Mercer opened a secure door, her voice low. "He's just ahead, Director." Jonathan gave a single nod. For hours Nathan had endured humiliation. That ended now. The building that once mocked his name now quaked under its weight. And soon, father and son would stand together. The balance irrevocably shifted. Jonathan's jaw was set, his voice calm as ever. But the message was clear. This would not be brushed aside. Not tonight. Not ever again. Every step deeper into the precinct is a promise to his son, to himself, and to the system that truth, once revealed, could never be silenced. As they approached the final hallway, whispers gave way to silence. Jonathan's presence radiated authority, but beneath it burned the fire of a father wronged. And though he hadn't raised his voice once, every officer who crossed his path understood. The ground beneath them had shifted permanently, and nothing would return to normal. When Jonathan passed, officers straightened instinctively. Those who had ignored him earlier now stood rigid, some saluting, others avoiding his eyes. The power in the station was no longer theirs. It belonged to the man walking steadily toward his son. The atmosphere was transformed, heavy with anticipation. Justice had entered, and it would not leave. They reached a windowless interview room where Nathan had been moved from the cell. When the door opened, Jonathan felt a jolt, seeing his son, exhausted, shirt wrinkled, a small scrape along his cheek where metal met skin. Nathan looked up, relief easing his face at the sight of his father. "Dad," he said, voice steady despite everything. Jonathan crossed the room, hugged him hard, then examined the cut gently. "Any other injuries?" he asked quietly. Nathan shook his head. "Just my wrists from the cuffs. It's manageable." Jonathan nodded and sat across from him as Captain Mercer slipped out discreetly. "Tell me everything," he said. "Don't leave anything out." For 20 focused minutes, Nathan detailed the whole ordeal, being shadowed by the cruiser, the sneering comments, the wrenching arm grab, the laughter at the station, the delay of his call. He recounted each moment with precision, the humiliation still raw, the quiet resolve strengthening as he spoke. Jonathan listened without interruption, asking only sparse clarifying questions, letting his son set the pace. When Nathan finished, Jonathan placed a steady hand on his shoulder. "You did everything right," he said. "You stayed calm, respectful, deliberate, exactly how we discussed. What happened wasn't your fault. The misconduct belongs to them, not you." Nathan nodded, then exhaled. "What happens now?" Jonathan took a measured beat. "Now we do this properly. There are two routes. The easy one, I leverage my position, make this disappear. They get internal discipline, you walk, we move on." He paused. "The harder one, expose everything, profiling, rights violations, falsified narratives." He leaned in slightly. "It'll be tougher on us, scrutiny, pushback, headlines, but it might prevent this from happening so easily to someone else. This must also be your decision, Nathan. Whichever path you choose, I'm with you." Nathan sat quiet, weighing consequences, imagining faces like his facing the same system tomorrow. "What about the guy in the cell, Marcus?" he asked. "He's been there since yesterday for loitering. No one's coming." Jonathan nodded, understanding. "If we take the harder path, we don't just help you, we widen the lens. We push for pattern recognition, not a one-off fix." Nathan's eyes steadied with purpose. Then we take the hard path, he said. Jonathan squeezed his shoulder, pride briefly eclipsing anger. Then that's what we'll do. Outside, word of the FBI director's presence was racing through the precinct, altering posture and tone. Inside, father and son reached quiet agreement, the course set against the comfortable machinery of avoidance. Officer Granger immediately dialed his uncle, Judge Leonard Granger, a man wired into the local hierarchy, and friendly with Police Commissioner Robert Hale. The judge had been midway through a golf round with Hale when the call hit. Both recognized an unfolding disaster with unusual speed and practiced calculation. Within an hour, an off-the-books huddle formed in the commissioner's office. Judge Granger, Commissioner Hale, and the department's general counsel mapping triage. "Make this vanish," Hale barked, pacing. "Drop charges, suspend the officers, draft a formal apology," the judge added, "plus a settlement with an airtight NDA. Keep it contained." Counsel looked unconvinced. "Director Carter is known for integrity. He may refuse hush money." Hale stopped pacing, fixing them with a stare. "Everyone has leverage. If he declines, remind him public theatrics could politicize his role. He needs to look impartial, not vengeful." None realized Jonathan had already anticipated every move and set counters. The local network was about to learn they had chosen the wrong family to corral with unwritten policies of pressure and pretense. Have you wondered what happens when entrenched power realizes it miscalculated? Would you aim for quiet payback or structural change? Comment 1 to focus only on Nathan, 2 to expose the entire system. Like this video and subscribe to follow how a father turns personal injury into public reform. What would you risk to safeguard not just your household, but your neighborhood, your town? The Carter home sat on a calm, oak-lined street in Crestwood Heights, indistinguishable from other stately houses, at least from the curb. Inside was different. In the days after Nathan's arrest, Elaine Carter, formidable civil rights attorney, canceled court to center everything on their son. The kitchen island became command post, legal pads, reports, Elaine's laptop open to case law. Nathan sat with headphones, trying to catch up on schoolwork, mind tugged back to the cell. The front door clicked. Jonathan entered, still in work attire, carrying a thick manila folder. Elaine looked up. "How'd the meeting with Deputy Director Kim go?" Jonathan set the file down, loosening his tie. "He's fully supportive. The Bureau will back the approach we choose." He glanced at Nathan, who had removed his headphones. "How are you doing today?" Jonathan asked. Nathan shrugged. "Better. Sleep's rough." Nightmares had started the day he got home. Trapped hallways, faceless uniforms, laughter he couldn't outrun. Jonathan and Elaine exchanged a quiet look as Jonathan opened the folder. "We ran backgrounds on Granger and Doyle. This isn't their first dance." He fanned out documents. 12 force complaints in 3 years. 9 involved people of color. All dismissed during internal review. Elaine skimmed with a litigator's eye. All tossed by the same board member, Captain James Wilton. Jonathan nodded. "Commissioner Hale's brother-in-law." He pulled another sheet. "That's the surface." We went deeper on precinct stats. The numbers were stark across Crestwood Heights and nearby districts. Black residents and visitors are 6 times more likely to be stopped, 8 times more likely to be searched, 10 times more likely to be arrested than white counterparts, controlling for crime rates, Jonathan said. Elaine's face hardened. "That's not drift. That's design." Nathan listened, stunned. Jonathan drew out another file. Worse, an unofficial push called Neighborhood Integrity. Never enters official orders, but shows up in emails between certain officers, including Granger and Doyle. He laid down printouts, phrases about maintaining standards, protecting property values. Code so thin it barely tried. The subtext wasn't subtle, the practice chillingly consistent. "It's engineered to discourage people of color from moving into or even visiting affluent areas," Jonathan said. "When someone important wants quiet, cases evaporate, complaints die in review, and the officers get commendations." The room felt smaller. The system wasn't frayed, it was stitched this way. Nathan's jaw tightened as the pattern sharpened. While his parents assessed the evidence, Nathan worked through the larger truth. It wasn't random, it wasn't bad luck, it was architecture, built to make someone like him feel unwelcome on streets he called home. That realization settled heavy, then hardened into something steadier, resolve that didn't need to shout to be heard. Later, after Nathan went upstairs, Jonathan and Elaine continued in low tones. I've looped in Justice's Civil Rights Division, Jonathan said. The data and emails could justify a federal probe into biased policing. Elaine nodded, but worried. We must tread carefully. Your position and Aiden, Nathan, create optics critics will weaponize. Jonathan exhaled slowly. I've thought that through. I've formally recused from direct involvement. Deputy Director Kim will oversee any bureau action. Elaine took his hand. That cures the technical conflict. But narratives matter. Some will shout, personal vendetta. Jonathan's voice cooled. Let them. This stopped being personal the second they made it systematic. A sudden crash upstairs, then a muffled sound. They bolted to Nathan's room. He stood near his desk, breathing hard, shattered glass at his feet. Sorry, he blurted, voice unsteady. Thinking about school tomorrow. My hand just. He trailed off, staring at the shards, as if they'd fallen by themselves. Elaine swiftly gathered the pieces, while Jonathan watched their son, concern deepening. The confident junior who loved debate and basketball, now startled at small noises, struggled to track conversations. The wounds weren't only physical, the quieter ones would take longer. Healing wouldn't be linear. Justice might be, at best, a beginning. Next morning, Jonathan made calls from his home office before heading in. First, to a trusted analyst, Sarah Chen, for deeper dives on key players in the police and judicial ranks. Second, to Marcus Washington, the man from Nathan's cell. Jonathan had arranged a public defender's review. Charges were dropped for lack of evidence. Third, he spoke with his security lead, increasing protection around Elaine and Nathan in case pressure turned into retaliation. By mid-afternoon, Sarah sent preliminary threads tying power together. Patterns that looked circumstantial alone began pointing in one direction. Familiar names, familiar venues, familiar outcomes traceable through money, privilege, and gatekeeping. The list was striking. Judge Leonard Granger, Commissioner Robert Hale, and 5 deep-pocket donors underwriting Police Foundation galas. All were members of an exclusive country club that, despite anti-discrimination laws, had never admitted a black member. The same circle had fought integrated housing for years, laundering exclusion through zoning and covenants. The paper trail wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Emails, donation patterns, hiring favors, review board appointments, each innocuous alone, damning together. The club's annual gala coincided with spikes in neighborhood integrity citations. Officers connected to donors received commendations the quarter after harassment complaints disappeared. Correlation stacked like bricks into a wall. Jonathan highlighted dates, handing copies to Elaine. We'll bring this to civil rights and the U.S. Attorney. Kim will firewall me out. We pursue both lanes, criminal exposure where warranted, and a pattern or practice investigation. Elaine nodded. And we take care of Nathan, first and always. They agreed. Accountability and healing would advance together. By late afternoon, Sarah pushed one more report, interlocking boards, real estate interests, and donor-hosted policy roundtables where enforcement priorities were whispered, not written. The same voices shaping housing rules shaped patrol patterns. The machine fed itself. Very politely, Nathan stepped into the kitchen, listening. Steadier now, ready to stand, not just endure. Sarah's last line chilled and clarified. Judge Granger, Commissioner Hale, and 5 benefactors, all country club members, no black admissions ever recorded, had also opposed inclusive housing initiatives for years, cloaking their efforts with municipal language. The same hands setting neighborhood boundaries were steering who got stopped, searched, and jailed, quietly, predictably, profitably. Further, Officer Granger's evaluations praised him for upholding community standards in high value districts, language echoing the shadow neighborhood integrity push. The mosaic was unmistakable: coordinated exclusion hidden behind official phrasing and procedural haze. Meanwhile, Nathan's return to school proved rough, a test of patience and resilience. Some teachers and friends offered real support, yet rumors distorted the story as they ricocheted through hallways. In AP Physics, whispers circled his desk. At lunch, his teammate Devin slid over. Bro, what actually happened? People say you snapped on cops. Nathan searched for words that didn't sound defensive. He tried to explain without pleading for sympathy or framing himself as a victim. By the final bell, the emotional labor of correcting lies and absorbing looks left him spent. Walking home, he realized the day had been a marathon of restraint, each conversation another reminder of how narratives mutate. That evening, when Elaine proposed filing a public lawsuit, the Carter kitchen became a strategy room and a fault line. Litigation puts facts on the record, she insisted. It can't be buried in internal reviews. Jonathan didn't disagree, yet argued for a broader front, not only a case, but a systemic probe. Their professions shaped their instincts. Elaine, a courtroom fighter, favored visible action and sworn testimony. Jonathan, seasoned in federal machinery, preferred methodical pressure at strategic choke points. Both sought the same destination, accountability, but mapped different roads. Nathan, listening from the stairs, felt suspended between two worlds. Before and after the night that changed him, the experience had peeled back innocence and replaced theory with contact. He now understood the architecture he'd only heard about, its locks, levers, and polite disguises. The path ahead felt uncertain, but one truth was fixed: the Carters wouldn't be quiet, and the system's shadow games were nearing daylight. Have you ever watched power try to purchase absolution? Would you take money and retreat, or risk everything to tell the truth? Comment 1, to take the payout and move on. 2, to fight, regardless of cost. Like and subscribe to see which course Director Carter chooses at the cliff's edge. What if someone tried leveraging your career to muzzle your family's pursuit of justice? 3 days after Nathan's arrest, Commissioner Hale's office requested a private resolution with Jonathan, carefully phrased to avoid heat. Jonathan recognized the maneuver instantly, the classic technique for discreetly dissolving civic embarrassments. After conferring with Elaine and Nathan, he accepted, intending something very different than Hale anticipated. The meeting was set for Friday afternoon in Judge Granger's chambers. Neutral space, though nothing about a judge uncle to the arresting officer felt neutral to Jonathan, who logged every signal as he prepared. Jonathan arrived on the dot, waved off coffee, and sat across from Commissioner Hale, Judge Granger, and a visibly uneasy city attorney. The paneled walls, leather-spined volumes, and ancestral oil portraits were stagecraft for authority, an intimidation ritual Jonathan had seen and dismantled many times before. Hale, broad-shouldered, with a practiced politician's smile, began smoothly. Director Carter, I regret what happened to your son. That's not our standard. Jonathan nodded once, offering nothing back. The silence lengthened, negotiation oxygen depriving their script. Hale pressed on. We've reviewed thoroughly and will act immediately. All charges against Nathan will be dismissed, with no record retained, Hale said. Judge Granger leaned forward, robe absent, but authority intact. Additionally, both officers received 2-week suspensions without pay and mandatory training. The city attorney slid paperwork across. Also, a $100,000 settlement for distress, contingent on standard confidentiality. Jonathan glanced at the document without touching it. What does your confidentiality require? The attorney cleared his throat. Standard terms: no public statements, no further legal action, mutual acknowledgement, no admission of wrongdoing. Jonathan's tone stayed unreadable. And this, you believe, remedies what occurred to my son? Hale spread his hands in manufactured reasonableness. It's a fair, constructive resolution that lets everyone move forward. Public fights become divisive distractions. Jonathan finally picked up the pages, scanning deliberately. And if I find these terms insufficient? The air shifted as Judge Granger leaned back, signaling the real message. Director Carter, the judge said, voice honeyed, we all have duties. Your position rests on public trust and neutrality. Pursuing personal grievances through official channels risks an appearance of impropriety. The subtext wasn't subtle. Stand down, or your career comes into play. Jonathan set the pages down, eyes steady. Gentlemen, thank you for your time. Before I respond, a few updates, he said evenly. First, I formally recused myself from any FBI action the day after Nathan's arrest. That filing is with the Attorney General and our ethics office. The commissioner and judge traded tight, involuntary glances. Second, DOJ Civil Rights opened a preliminary review yesterday into discriminatory policing patterns in this district based on statistics predating my son's case. He let it land. Third, all evidence, body cam, dispatch, complaint histories, has been preserved under federal protocols. Any alteration now is obstruction. The city attorney paled distinctly. Finally, Jonathan added, I've provided a detailed account to investigative journalist Maya Rodriguez regarding neighborhood integrity. The story is paused at my request while DOJ completes its initial assessment. Silence erased the room's stagecraft, their leverage dissolved. Jonathan had pre-built guardrails against every angle of containment. Hale recovered first. This is highly irregular, using federal tools for a private matter. Jonathan's reply was surgical. A pattern of civil rights violations is not private. My son is one of many. His last name doesn't dilute the data's meaning or the government's duty, he stood. I decline your offer. Good day, exiting. Jonathan's phone buzzed. Elaine. Maya called. Someone in the department reached out with info. The quiet facade was cracking from inside. Meanwhile, Officer Doyle sat idling outside the City Tribune, debating his choice for the 20th time. 15 years had taught him the unwritten code: protect the badge, whatever it takes. But this week shook something loose. Maybe it was the teenager's face when they mocked him. Maybe realizing he'd become what he once despised. Maybe self-preservation, seeing higher-ups poised to let him burn. He'd contacted Maya Rodriguez, known for relentless reporting on police misconduct. Their meeting ran nearly 2 hours. Doyle described selective deployment to affluent corridors with instructions to discourage certain people. He outlined how complaint files were cleaned before review boards saw them, and how dissenters were reassigned to punishing shifts. Maya took notes, expression hardening with each detail that transformed rumor into documented practice. Most damning were archived emails and texts, off-channel directives never entering official systems, spelling out the discriminatory intent behind neighborhood integrity. Why talk now? Maya asked gently. Doyle stared into his coffee. I signed up to protect, not terrorize. And when this breaks, I won't be on the wrong side of history. The following morning, Nathan returned to school, still raw from the week. Every hallway felt different, every glance a maybe. His AP history teacher, Mrs. Alvarez, paused him after class. What happened wasn't right. If you need extensions or space, ask her kindness tap the wall he'd built. He nodded thanks. At lunch, he sat with his usual group, conversation stuttering whenever police or authorities surfaced. Only his closest friend Tyler named the obvious. Man, what they did was foul. My dad says those officers are done once your dad's through. Nathan nudged Fraser around his tray. It isn't that simple. Complexity rarely fits gossip. He wanted to say the point wasn't punishment alone, it was dismantling incentives that made the abuse predictable. He wanted to say accountability must outlast headlines. Instead, he exhaled and said, There's more going on than people think. Tyler nodded slowly, sensing gravity he couldn't yet map. Across town, Maya cross-checked Doyle's files against public records, donor disclosures, and review board rosters. Patterns aligned: money, commendations, integrity metrics, sanitized complaints. She called Jonathan to confirm timelines. He refused off the record favors, insisted on formal channels. Let the facts carry the weight, he said. The process must be unimpeachable. Elaine drafted a potential complaint while also outlining a roadmap for a pattern or practice case, threading Nathan's experience into the wider architecture. She included Marcus's drop charges, the email codes, dispatch mismatch, and board conflicts. Every paragraph tightened the net, translating outrage into filings that institutions couldn't easily dodge. That evening, Nathan sat with both parents at the kitchen table. No speeches, just quiet, shared air. Jonathan slid over a copy of Sarah's latest chart, arrows linking names, boards, donors, precinct incentives. This is bigger than us, Nathan said softly. Elaine squeezed his hand. Yes, which is why we do it right. The plan crystallized: heal at home, protect the family, and push on two tracks: federal investigation firewalled from Jonathan, and civil action Elaine could steer openly. Meanwhile, Maya prepared a meticulous timeline, anchoring each claim in documents. The goal wasn't virality, it was durability that survived scrutiny and time. The next day, Nathan entered the building braced, hallways buzzed, screens lit with partial truths. His AP history teacher, now Mrs. Garcia, due to a subrotation, checked on him again. If anything becomes too much, my door's open, he thanked her. At lunch, he sat among friends who cared but stumbled. Conversation kept hitching when authority came up. Laughter felt thin. Only Tyler ventured straight through it. Dude, that was brutal. My dad swears those cops are cooked once your father's involved. Nathan toyed with his sandwich. It's complicated, he said. Justice, he knew now, wasn't a moment. It was the work that follows. It isn't just about two officers, Nathan said. He tried to outline the broader pattern his parents had uncovered, but translating structural bias for 16-year-old classmates was hard. Some nodded, genuinely supportive. Others shifted uneasily, unwilling to stare too long at what the implications might mean for them. By day's end, he was drained from navigating social tripwires. Near the exit, a knot of students huddled around a phone. Nathan glimpsed the screen and froze. Body cam footage from his arrest had leaked online. His private humiliation was now public content, consumed, replayed, judged by strangers in hallways. That night, as the Carters mapped next steps around the dining table, local news blasted breaking banners. An FBI director's son allegedly profiled. Officer whistleblower alleges systemic discrimination. The department's curated storyline unraveled in real time. Carefully stacked talking points toppled, scattered by documents, testimony, and a single conscience deciding to speak. Commissioner Hale rushed to a podium, promising a full internal review and complete transparency, the familiar choreography of crisis control. But the routine felt threadbare. Too many facts were already loose, too many eyes were watching, and too many people had decided their silence was part of the problem. The long, reliable cover up machine sputtered, exposed by overlap. Dispatch mismatches, sanitized complaints, coded emails, lopsided stats. The scandal widened beyond a single night into an indictment of policy dressed as procedure. What once passed for order now looked like design. Inequality maintained with polite language and official paperwork. Despite frantic efforts to dismiss everything quietly, Nathan's arraignment proceeded in courtroom 3B. The Carters insisted public record mattered. Elaine secured Judge Leonard Granger's recusal, citing his relationship to Officer Granger. Judge Marianne Cho took the bench instead. The gallery crackled with energy, cameras perched like ravens along the back row. Local outlets packed the seats, flanked by national correspondents drawn by the case's profile. Officers Granger and Doyle sat with department counsel, coached for days on their testimony. Their practiced calm suggested they still believed this was containable. An optics problem, not a collapse of credibility and careers. Nathan sat at counsel table beside Elaine, who insisted on representing him despite calls from prominent defense lawyers eager to claim the spotlight. Behind them, Jonathan occupied the first row, silent, immovable, answering no questions as he entered. Judge Cho called the court to order, her tone crisp, pace uncompromising. We are here on 2024 CR 187, State vs. Nathan Carter, charges resisting arrest and suspicious behavior. Not guilty, Your Honor, Elaine said, and we move to dismiss for lack of probable cause and constitutional violations. Assistant District Attorney Brooks objected at once, insisting reasonable suspicion existed given recent criminal activity nearby. Judge Cho studied both tables. I'll hear testimony before ruling on dismissal. Mr. Brooks, your first witness, Officer Granger, took the stand, oath steady, though sweat beaded his hairline. On direct, he recited the rehearsed narrative. Furtive movement, hostile tone, sudden reach, each brick stacking toward a justified takedown. Did the defendant claim residency in that neighborhood? Brooks asked. He said he lived there, Granger replied, but offered no proof of address. Given his behavior, we doubted the claim. The script sounded familiar, confidence draped over the same gaps that had already begun to gape in the public record. Elaine approached for cross with surgical calm. You testified you acted off a suspect description. Please state it. Granger shifted. Male, suspicious activity in an area with recent break-ins. Elaine held his gaze. Defense Exhibit A, dispatch logs, lists a white male, 30s, red hoodie. My client is a black teen in a blue decathlon jacket. Explain. His confidence thinned. Behavior was the primary factor, he managed. Elaine continued. You also said he was aggressive. Your body cam functioned then, correct? Yes. Let's play it, she said. The monitor filled with footage of Nathan calm, hands visible, voice measured, contradicting Granger's claims in front of judge, press, and public. Point by point, Elaine juxtaposed testimony, report language, and video, revealing contradictions like fault lines. Granger clung to training buzzwords. The record refused to cooperate. Each new inconsistency widened the gap between his certainty and what the courtroom could hear, see, and read with its own senses. Officer Doyle followed, posture stiff, answers precise from rehearsal. He insisted their choices tracked training and included no racial bias. Elaine abruptly pivoted. Is it standard to mock a detained minor by suggesting his father cleans toilets at City Hall? A ripple cut the room. Doyle's jaw tightened. I don't recall. Elaine stepped to the bench. Your Honor, the defense seeks to play enhanced audio Exhibit C from Officer Doyle's dash cam. Department counsel objected. Not in discovery. Elaine replied calmly. Raw footage was produced. Specialized enhancement recovered inaudible dialogue after the reported malfunction of both body cams. Judge Cho considered, then nodded. Allowed. The speakers carried laughter, the toilets jeer, and derision at Nathan's mention of federal employment, each word unmistakable. Jonathan's expression never moved, but he never looked away from Doyle. As the audio faded, the courtroom's temperature dropped. The department table stared down at their notes like lifelines. Elaine next called Dr. Eleanor Shaw, a statistician. She mapped the stop search arrest disparities across predominantly white neighborhoods, controlling for crime rates and time. The probability these disparities occur by chance is below 0.001%, she said. They're consistent with systemic practices, not individual anomalies. The gallery scribbled furiously. Ada Brooks tried to puncture her credibility, but Dr. Shaw welcomed each question, expanding on methodology, data sources, controls, sensitivity checks. The more he pressed, the sturdier the framework appeared. Elaine rose again. The defense calls Deputy Director Min Kim of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. A hush rippled as he entered. Sworn, Kim identified himself as the acting lead on the FBI's civil rights portfolio. Are you investigating this case? Elaine asked. Not this prosecution, he said, but I lead a federal task force reviewing patterns within this department, focusing on the so called Neighborhood Integrity Initiative and its disparate impact. Department counsel erupted. Prejudicial, beyond scope. Judge Cho allowed limited context establishing pattern, barring granular details. Kim continued. Preliminary findings indicate selective enforcement designed to discourage minority presence in specific districts through stops, escalations, charging decisions. Indicators reach beyond patrol to supervisory ranks, with potential judicial entanglements, reporters' pens scraped like rain. At counsel table, Granger and Doyle exchanged stricken looks. Jonathan's restraint, they finally understood, hadn't been weakness, it was timing. The bigger machine had been quietly assembling, its gears meshing beyond their line of sight. The day's testimony ended. Judge Cho promised a dismissal ruling in the morning. Outside, microphones multiplied. Miss Carter, has your son's case revealed systemic bias? A reporter shouted. Elaine's voice was measured steel. What happened to Nathan isn't unique. What's unusual is that he has parents who know how to fight it. The goal isn't special treatment for our child, it's equal treatment for everyone else's. Flashbulbs popped. Nathan stood beside his mother, less the frightened teen from a concrete bench and more a young man discovering his voice inside a larger story. Across town, inboxes pinged, whistleblower tips, neighborhood accounts, old complaints newly remembered. The narrative no longer belonged to the department's press office. Over the next days, the courthouse became a magnet. Lawyers, advocates, clergy, students, people who hadn't spoken to each other in years, now stood shoulder to shoulder, trading notes and phone numbers. A helicopter thudded overhead. The marble steps thrummed with urgency. Silence, suddenly, had become the louder risk. Inside the department, memos flew. Cooperate. Preserve. No external comment. Hard drives were imaged, sign-out logs reviewed. The old reflex, Titan ranks, found itself fenced by federal preservation orders and watchful reporters. The usual exits, delay, recast, settle, looked smaller each hour, guarded by process instead of personalities. The city attorney floated compromises. They sank. Donors placed polite calls. Recordings noted them. The country club calendar shifted a gala. RSVPs leaked anyway. The machine that once moved unseen now clanked in public view. Every hinge squeaked. Every doorframe groaned. Every previously invisible hand left fingerprints. When the hearing resumed, Ada Brooks argued to proceed to trial. Elaine renewed her motion. She stacked dispatch logs, audio, video, disciplinary histories, and Dr. Shaw's findings into a single, coherent lattice. Probable cause collapses under the record, Esquishade, she said. This is not policing, it's pretext wrapped in paperwork. Judge Cho's ruling was concise and devastating. Charges dismissed. Her rebuke focused on mismatched dispatch descriptions, contradicted testimony, and rights violations. She referred portions of the record to oversight bodies and noted potential perjury concerns. The gallery exhaled in a wave. At the department table, shoulders sagged like sails without wind. Outside, microphones rushed again. Does this end here? Someone shouted. Elaine answered plainly. No. Dismissal is relief, not resolution. Pattern requires remedy. She thanked Dr. Shaw and nodded to community leaders standing behind the rope line. The crowd's mix, old, young, neighbors, strangers, felt like a verdict of its own. Nathan spoke briefly. I'm grateful. But many people don't get cameras, lawyers, or headlines. This is about them too. He stepped back. Jonathan, ever silent, rested a hand on his shoulder. Across the plaza, bells from a nearby church told the hour like a metronome of change. In the weeks that followed, ripple became current. Judge Cho's dismissal was only the first stone. Local stations that once ran routine police blurbs now aired investigations on discriminatory enforcement. The city learned new vocabulary for old practices, and the quiet roots of power suddenly had traffic, questions, subpoenas, and sunlight. Community forums that once drew a handful of stalwarts now overflowed with neighbors from every background. The Carter family found themselves at the center of a movement they hadn't sought but now embraced. Nathan, initially wary of attention, discovered a steady voice he hadn't known he possessed and a purpose he couldn't ignore. With his parents' support, he launched a student coalition, Youth for Equal Justice. What started as a living room circle soon included teens from schools across the district. This isn't about me anymore, Nathan said at their third meeting, voice steadier than weeks prior. It's about stopping this from happening to anyone else. The group organized Know Your Rights workshops, designed teen friendly pamphlets, and began documenting discriminatory encounters at school and with police. They tracked dates, locations, and outcomes, building receipts. Their goal wasn't outrage for its own sake, it was practical armor, information that turned whispered stories into evidence community leaders and lawyers could use. Marcus Washington, the man who'd shared Nathan's cell, became a mentor, offering history and hard won context. You've got energy and moral clarity, he told them. From folks like me, you need the backstory, the patterns, how this keeps reinventing itself. He taught them to connect dots patiently, to outlast spin with persistence. Meanwhile, Jonathan faced growing political pressure from allies of the department. Senator Pierce Harrington, flush with police union donations, demanded oversight hearings into what he framed as the FBI director's personal vendetta. Cameras loved the line. The senator insisted bureau resources belonged on national security, not family quarrels dressed as policy. Direct the bureau to bigger threats, he told reporters. Behind closed doors, Commissioner Hale's confidants whispered in Washington that Jonathan's leadership had become politicized, compromised by personal stakes. The aim was old as power itself: make the story about the messenger, not the message, blur the pattern by attacking the narrator. Elaine's firm absorbed cases uncovered by the investigation, preparing a class action seeking structural change, not just checks. Calls flooded their intake line, stories echoing Nathan's with chilling familiarity. They built a dedicated triage team, logging incidents, cross referencing dates, preserving screenshots and voicemails. Patterns emerged, less rumor than roadmap. One afternoon, Elaine's assistant appeared at her door. Someone here to see you, no appointment. Officer Doyle entered alone, without department counsel. He sat across from her and exhaled. I'm ready to testify, he said, about the unofficial directives, the harassment patterns, the buried complaints, everything leadership pretends doesn't exist. Why now? Elaine asked. He studied his hands. I joined to protect people, not to terrorize kids walking home. They're setting Granger and me up as fall guys while the architects stroll away clean. I won't carry their sins alone. His testimony would anchor statistics with a witness inside the machine. As neighborhood integrity details emerged, the community split predictably. Some Crestwood residents condemned discriminatory tactics executed in their name. Others defended them as necessary for safety and property values, euphemisms barely hiding bias. Neighborhood forums and Facebook groups became battlegrounds where euphemism met data and personal stories cut through practiced talking points. Town halls grew so tense mediators were brought in. Commissioner Hale and Judge Granger scrambled to contain the fallout. Abandoning the strategy of isolating Granger and Doyle, they pivoted to attacking the federal probe's legitimacy. The new refrain, local control, not federal overreach, echoed across pressers and carefully placed op-eds. Behind the curtain, they worked phones, lobbying contacts to pressure justice to cool the inquiry. Progress was modest until real estate magnate Richard Cavendish, Police Foundation board member, hosted a private fundraiser for key congressional allies. Briefly, the wind shifted. Money, as always, tried to redraw the map, while cameras looked elsewhere. Soon after, Jonathan was called to a closed-door meeting with the Attorney General, who diplomatically stressed appropriate boundaries between personal matters and official duties. Jonathan emerged composed, but at home, Elaine saw the strain. The message was clear. Powerful people preferred the story quiet and the system untouched. "They're trying to make this about me," he said on the back porch, away from Nathan's ears. "Classic play. Attack the messenger when the message won't bend." Elaine squeezed his hand. "That's why we widened it beyond Nathan. Dozens of families speaking together can't be dismissed as one man's grievance." Jonathan nodded, though his brow stayed furrowed. "I expected pushback," he said. "I underestimated how deep the roots go. Donors, boards, judges, committees. It's not a rumor network, it's infrastructure." The truth sounded less like scandal than blueprint, something built, funded, and maintained to look natural from a distance. For Nathan, the weeks after the hearing brought light and shadow. College recruiters noticed his calm under pressure and principled leadership. Civil rights groups floated internships, yet threats arrived anonymously. Emails, DMs, notes slipped under a windshield. Security tightened, routes changed. Courage, he learned, travels with vigilance, not naivete. School felt polarized. Some teachers and classmates stood up for him. Others muttered that he'd brought trouble to a quiet community. During practice, he overheard two teammates griping that the race thing was overblown. The coach called an impromptu huddle about empathy and perspective. Awkward, tense, necessary. Heads eventually nodded. Through everything, the Carters kept their eyes on a bigger horizon, justice beyond their kitchen table. The case had shifted from private harm to public reckoning, forcing overdue conversations about race, authority, and accountability. Survival was yesterday's goal, today's was reform. Tomorrow's, they hoped, might be trust rebuilt on truth. As Doyle predicted when he first approached journalist Maya Rodriguez, the truth kept surfacing, pulling more people to choose a side. 6 months after Nathan was wrongfully arrested walking home, a crowd gathered on the federal courthouse steps. The Department of Justice had an announcement that would reverberate beyond their city. Deputy Attorney General Sabrina Reyes stepped to the microphones, flanked by federal officials and community leaders. After extensive investigation, the Department of Justice is entering a consent decree requiring comprehensive reform of the Crestwood Police Department, she said. Applause broke, then hushed. The decree's terms would test whether transformation could be enforced and measured. "Our investigation found compelling evidence of systemic civil rights violations," Reyes continued. "We documented discriminatory enforcement patterns and failures of accountability at multiple levels. The decree mandated independent oversight, universal body cam activation, transparent complaint procedures, reworked use of force policies, and regular disparity audits with public dashboards so residents could see progress or the lack of it. Most consequentially, it dismantled the shadow Neighborhood Integrity Program, explicitly prohibiting race, ethnicity, or economic status in enforcement decisions. Supervisors would face discipline for off-channel directives. Promotions would require disparity reviews. Every incentive that rewarded exclusion had to be rewritten. The blueprint would no longer be quiet or optional. Fallout reshaped the power map. Officer Granger faced criminal charges for evidence tampering and civil rights violations after investigators uncovered altered reports and deleted video segments. Commissioner Hale resigned when emails surfaced, showing his direct knowledge of and support for discriminatory practices. Judge Granger entered judicial review, his reputation fractured beyond repair. For the Carters, the journey was bruising yet purposeful. 2 weeks after the decree, Jonathan testified before Congress on policing reform. "I appear in multiple capacities," he began, "as FBI director, as a career lawman, and as a father whose son experienced discriminatory policing firsthand. These roles reinforce rather than contradict one another." He explained how isolated incidents often reflect institutional design. "The officers who arrested my son weren't merely bad actors," he said. "They responded to incentives, expectations, and unwritten rules. Meaningful reform must address the orchard, not just pluck the fruit. Members leaned in. The metaphor landed with bipartisan clarity. Meanwhile, Youth for Equal Justice partnered with Marcus to build a community oversight board with teeth, authority to review practices and specific complaints. Unlike symbolic predecessors, the board had access to data, footage, and discipline records. Its charter prioritized transparency over optics, sunlight over slogans, findings over press releases. You can't fix what you can't see, Marcos told the first public session. The consent decree guaranteed the board's access for at least 5 years, with extension tied to compliance metrics. Meetings were live streamed, archives searchable, recommendations time boxed. Accountability, for once, came with deadlines and receipts everyone could read. On a warm Saturday, the community gathered for a reconciliation event in the same park where Nathan had been stopped. There were speakers, workshops, listening circles, designed to bridge racial and economic divides. Elaine helped convene it, inviting reform minded officers and families harmed by the old regime to share the space. A table near the bandstand offered Know Your Rights cards beside complaint forms and QR codes to the oversight portal. Teens staffed them, Nathan among them, answering questions, directing elders to translators, helping parents file reports. It felt like a different kind of crowd control, not police lines, but lines of people learning power. Near the playground, a small circle formed, neighbors who'd once avoided eye contact. An officer removed his cap before speaking. A grandmother recounted a grandson's stop. A shop owner admitted he'd called things in too quickly. None of it fixed the past, but the conversation didn't end where it used to start. As the sun lowered, Jonathan stood back, letting the community take the microphone. He didn't need to speak for change to move. Nathan watched kids chalk dignity across the path while Marcus laughed with them, showing how to bold the lines. Elaine checked the sign-ups. Names kept coming, steady as dusk. In the park's late light, the story felt larger than one family and smaller than a slogan. Ordinary people choosing something harder than denial. The stage didn't belong to officials anymore. It belonged to neighbors. Justice wasn't a headline or a hearing. It was the everyday work they now refused to postpone. Nathan hadn't planned to speak, but as he reached the mic, nerves gave way to purpose. 6 months ago, I was cuffed and shamed on this very spot for the crime of walking while black, he began. I was afraid and furious then. Today, I'm none of that. Today, I'm hopeful, not because my story is rare. It isn't, he continued, scanning the diverse crowd. What's different is how our community responded, naming the harm, demanding accountability, and building real fixes. He described dozens of youth who'd shared similar experiences with his group, many without the safety nets that helped him fight back. This was never just about me or my parents' titles, Nathan said. It's about ensuring justice doesn't depend on who your family is or what job they hold. As the event wrapped, people approached, elders recalling decades of unequal enforcement, young organizers energized by reforms, even officers committed to the department's new direction. That evening, after the crowds thinned, Nathan and his father sat quietly in the backyard. The sun threw long shadows across the grass. They let the silence breathe before Jonathan finally spoke. I never told you why I joined the Bureau, he said softly. Nathan looked over, surprised. His father rarely mentioned beginnings. Jonathan's voice turned reflective. When I was 11, your grandfather was wrongly arrested. He was driving through an upscale neighborhood to pick up a package for his boss when someone reported a suspicious car. Police stopped him, searched him, and took him in. The parallels lingered between them, undeniable and heavy. Back then there was no one with clout to help, Jonathan said. He spent 8 months behind bars before charges were dropped. He lost his job. We almost lost our home. When he came back, something in him had dimmed. Nathan listened, absorbing the weight of a wound he'd inherited. I decided then to change the system from within, Jonathan continued. If I could reach a place of influence, maybe others wouldn't endure what he did. Nathan exhaled slowly, seeing his father's career through a different lens. The past clarified the present like a hidden key finally turning. So, when you started Youth for Equal Justice, Jonathan said, you extended a legacy that began before you were born. Same fight, different tools. Nathan considered the lineage. Do you think Grandpa would be proud? Jonathan smiled, resting a hand on his son's shoulder. He'd be proud of who you've become. Night fell over a neighborhood, inching forward, conversation by conversation, policy by policy, block by block. Father and son sat together, two generations whose private pain had triggered public reckoning. The road ahead would be uneven. Real reform rarely runs straight, but light had been forced into places built for shadows. The path wouldn't be easy or quick, but by dragging what hid in darkness into daylight, they had opened space for healing and transformation stretching far beyond one family. It reached toward a future where equal justice might finally become practice rather than promise, substance rather than slogan or speech. What would you do if you saw injustice in your own backyard? Would you speak even if it cost popularity? This story shows how one family's resolve can ripple through an entire system. If it resonated, please like and subscribe for more true stories about confronting discrimination with courage and strategy. Drop your thoughts on how we build fairer communities. Have you witnessed or experienced bias? How did you respond? Share your stories. Someone else might find a path through yours. Thanks for watching. Remember, the bravest act can be telling the truth, even when powerful people would rather you stay quiet. The Carter's journey shows that confronting discrimination demands both patience and a plan. Jonathan's deliberate approach, gathering records, building alliances, exposing patterns instead of chasing isolated flare ups, proved more effective than outrage alone. Anger sparked the work, discipline carried it, ensuring evidence outlasted headlines and reforms weren't just promises on paper. Nathan's shift from target to advocate shows how pain can fuel public purpose. Privilege and position, used responsibly, can open doors for those without them. Real justice isn't purchased with hush money or carved as one off exceptions. It's built through transparent processes that address causes, not just consequences. Most of all, seemingly isolated incidents often reveal institutional design. Change comes when documentation replaces denial, when recurring patterns are named, and when coalitions cross lines of age, race, and class to demand accountability. Speaking truth to power, teen, whistleblower, or parent, remains the most reliable tool against persistent injustice. Which moments opened your eyes to inequality? Have you seen bias and wished you could act? Share in the comments. Your experience could embolden someone else to step forward when it matters. Stories build courage by showing we're not alone, and that collective witness can shift what once felt immovable. If this account of confronting racism resonated, tap like so others can find it. Subscribe for more live stories that illuminate social issues needing attention. Join a community that trades performative outrage for durable action, one that measures progress and keeps receipts when institutions would prefer the lights dimmed. And if someone you know needs this reminder, share it today. In the face of injustice, silence isn't neutral. It protects the status quo. Together, we can cultivate neighborhoods where everyone is met with dignity and respect, and where no one's safety depends on their ZIP code, wallet, or last name. There are moments in life that refuse to pass quietly. They cling to us, carving lessons so deep that generations feel their weight. The story of the Carter family, though rooted in a single night of injustice, became a mirror for an entire community and perhaps for a nation that often struggles to face itself. For older Americans, many of whom have lived through the upheavals of the 1960s, the civil rights marches, and the promises of change that sometimes arrived too slowly, these lessons feel hauntingly familiar, yet they are also deeply relevant today. This journey leaves us with three essential truths. Truths not just for the young, but for every person who has ever wondered how justice can be reclaimed from systems designed to look the other way. It's natural to want to lash out when faced with injustice. Anger rises quickly. We want the world to feel what we feel. But Jonathan Carter, the father at the center of this story, taught us something older, slower, and far more powerful. He showed that patience, when paired with careful planning, can shake the walls of entrenched power more effectively than raw fury. Instead of storming the police station that had humiliated his son, Jonathan gathered evidence, built alliances, and exposed patterns rather than settling for a single incident. He reminded us that the system is fortified against outbursts. It counts on people losing steam. But when you keep calm, document carefully, and choose your timing, you deny those in power their easy excuses. For those of us over 65, patience isn't new. We've practiced it in our own lives through hardship, waiting for opportunities, or enduring the slow march of change. But Jonathan's approach reminds us that patience alone isn't enough. It must be tied to action. Evidence replaces rumor. Coalitions replace isolation. And time, instead of dulling outrage, sharpens it into something undeniable. Nathan Carter's transformation may be the most moving part of this story. A boy arrested for walking home became a young leader who launched Youth for Equal Justice, a student led group that stretched far beyond his neighborhood. He could have hidden, he could have let the shame and fear silence him. Instead, he spoke out, first nervously, then with a steady confidence that inspired his peers. For those of us who have faced painful moments, whether it was discrimination, loss, or the sting of being dismissed because of age or background, Nathan's journey offers hope. Pain can paralyze, but it can also propel. The trick lies in refusing to let trauma define the boundaries of your life. Instead, you let it fuel your determination to make sure others don't face the same harm. This is not a lesson reserved for the young. At any age, we can choose to transform what has hurt us into something that heals others. Maybe that means mentoring, volunteering, or speaking up in spaces where silence is easier. For Nathan, it meant turning humiliation into advocacy. For us, it might mean sharing our wisdom, our time, or even just our stories with those who need them. Perhaps the most profound lesson is that justice cannot be carried on one person's shoulders. The Carter family may have sparked the fire, but it was the community that kept it burning. From whistleblowers inside the police force to elders who remembered decades of bias, from teachers who reassured Nathan to teenagers who joined his advocacy group, each voice added weight. When Deputy Attorney General Sabrina Reyes announced sweeping reforms, it wasn't because one boy suffered. It was because dozens of voices documented, testified, and refused to let the narrative fade. Consent decrees, oversight boards, and new policies did not appear because Jonathan Carter held a high office. They appeared because a community refused to stand aside. This lesson is vital for anyone over 65. Many of us have witnessed decades of promises from leaders that fizzled once the cameras left. Real reform has never been gifted. It's been demanded by people standing shoulder to shoulder. Community is not just comfort, it is leverage. One of the most poignant moments came when Jonathan revealed to his son why he had joined the FBI in the first place. His own father, Nathan's grandfather, had been wrongfully arrested decades earlier, losing months of his life and nearly everything he had worked for. That pain pushed Jonathan to try to change the system from the inside. Now his son was doing the same from the outside, through advocacy, organizing, and refusing to be silent. This continuity of purpose across three generations shows us that justice is never won once and for all. It must be claimed repeatedly, each generation picking up where the last left off. For those of us in later years, this continuity should feel familiar. The battles of our youth, whether against segregation, for fair wages, or for basic dignity, did not end with one march or one law. The work continues, sometimes carried by our children and grandchildren, sometimes by neighbors or strangers we may never meet. The Carters' story isn't only about one boy, one arrest, or one city. It's about how patience and strategy defeat arrogance, how trauma can become purpose, and how communities, not individuals, drive reform. These are lessons worth remembering no matter our age. At 65 or 75, it's easy to feel the world has passed us by. But stories like this remind us that experience, wisdom, and memory are weapons against amnesia. We know what injustice looks like because we've seen it before, and we know that silence only strengthens it. Justice is slow, but with persistence, truth, and community, it can be made real. And perhaps the most important reminder of all, it is never too late to join the work. What about you? Have you lived through a moment that opened your eyes to injustice? Something you couldn't stay silent about? Maybe it was years ago, or maybe it happened just yesterday. I'd love to hear your story. Share it in the comments so others can learn from your experience. If this message spoke to you, please click the like button, subscribe to my YouTube channel, and join our community of people who believe in truth, courage, and accountability. Together, we can build neighborhoods and futures where fairness isn't a dream, but a reality.